Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into a seriously grim dark fable. We're talking philosophy, philology, and just absolutely staggering mechanical hubris. We're going to step into the world of Sir Brain. He's known as the Hermit of the Spirit, and this guy is so obsessed with absolute control that he literally attempts to rewrite the very language of nature itself. It's a pretty chilling story, honestly, about what happens when an architect of gears tries to conquer the unyielding silence of the wild, replacing natural breathing life with a brutal, ticking vocabulary. So let's explore how this desperate need to quantify and control everything inevitably clashes with a world that just completely refuses to be synchronized.
Right out of the gate, we're hit with this chilling warning from Alara. She's a figure known as the honest guest. And you know, this quote right here, it is the absolute linchpin of our whole philosophical journey today. She speaks directly to Sir Brain and hits the nail right on the head, pinpointing the fatal flaw in his massive grand design. He's accounted for every single pendulum swing, every gear ratio, every hyper-calculated movement, but he has completely and utterly ignored the sixth parable. Definitely keep this unwritten, uncatalogued rule in the back of your mind, because it's the ultimate shadow looming over his entire sprawling mechanical empire.
Now, to really get Sir Brain, we have to look at his original domain, the Victorian City. This is a suffocating, rigid place governed by dampening fields of law, logic, and this super heavy burden of lineage. He desperately wants to escape this, right? And he plans to do it by conquering what he calls the pure land of the hidden forest. The contrast here is just night and day. The city is all rigid iron and heavy expectations, whereas the forest breathes with the scent of wet earth and unoxidized potential. But here's the catch. To Sir Brain, this untouched wild isn't beautiful. No way. To him, it's a pristine mirror of truth that's just waiting to be shattered and reshaped by his dark ambitions far away from the noisy voices of the herd.
So, how does he plan to conquer this pure land? Well, he doesn't use a standard gear fresh out of a London factory. Instead, he uses a seed drawn from the temporal library. Now, in philological terms, this library is a realm where moments are essentially unbound folios, literally pages of time that refuse to keep faith with any master whatsoever. Time here has zero hierarchy. And Sir Brain takes a fragment of this unbound logic and violently presses it into the receptive, wet earth. He's trying to see if a miracle of malice can take root. He's essentially weaponizing a seed of untamed time to enforce total totalitarian control. Wild, right?
Okay, so this seed births a terrifying new theology, and it happens across three distinct parables. Step one is the unwitnessed root. This is where the absolute ice of the library meets the forest's pristine silence in this private dark event of the soul. For him, it proves that his sovereignty doesn't even need an audience to be absolute. Step two is the frozen germination. As it breaks the soil, you aren't getting green leaves, you're getting groaning seams of violet brass, literally a century of oxidation happening in a single breath. And finally, the rhythmic canopy emerges. It performs this rigid, synchronized dance over the abyss. Just like that, the natural, quiet forest is completely gone, replaced by a transitory theater for a mechanical god.
But here's the thing you really need to understand about this metallic growth. It is driven by a truly pathetic core. Sir Brain has this deeply ingrained psychological fear of stopping. Those groaning seams of violet brass we just talked about, they aren't a sign of strength at all. They are a physiological mirror of his own mechanical heart. The guy is fundamentally terrified of silence, of any world that doesn't constantly produce or tick. He destroys the natural, quiet ecosystem simply because a world without a relentless mechanical heartbeat is a world he literally cannot comprehend or control. He trades the soft breath of the forest for this jarring, metallic friction.
And this unnatural Eden pulses to the intense heat of the dark fire. This is the violet core of the alchemist's sheer, unyielding will. It's this dark energy source that physically forces the brass branches into a rigid, synchronized rhythm. Whenever the dark fire flares, the gears engage perfectly, completely overpowering any organic life that might still be hanging on. It's his sheer hubris made manifest, guys. A desperate attempt to dictate the very rhythm of reality in this isolated space, just to assert his absolute dominance over the natural order.
Now we hit the fourth parable, and this reveals the true, terrifying depths of his obsession with control. Perched right on top of these brass limbs is a clockwork snow owl. Its recursive memory coils are actively recording the dark fire's spread. But it isn't just sitting there being a passive observer. Its luminous eyes project a schematic showing that this entire forest is now a sovereign loom of time. Yep, Sirbrain is literally attempting to weave natural chaos and even the human capacity for refusal into a single deterministic fabric where he holds every single thread.
By the time we reach the fifth parable, the transformation is just a full-blown mechanical plague. The shadow of this artificial forest stretches across the glen like a black gnomon, the part of a sundial that casts the shadow. But the irony here, it isn't tracking natural sunlight. Not at all. It's marking a long, relentless descent into a gear-driven future. This is Sirbrain's permanent signature, already written across history, ensuring that even the purest land will be forced to either keep his time or completely break beneath the immense weight of it.
But then, Elara steps in and completely shatters this illusion of perfection. She trails her fingertips across the cold, vibrating brass of the forest floor, yet her honest pulse remains perfectly steady against the jagged, overfullness of that mechanical air. She represents the breathing, eternal feminine of true nature, the quiet, persistent rhythm of life itself. And from her perspective, Sirbrain's creation isn't a triumph at all. It is merely a lonely sound, a sublime, sure, but ultimately pathetic prison of unyielding gears.
Elara delivers this damning verdict right to his face. She exposes his so-called golden abundance as a fragile, terrified facade. She tells him point blank that what he's built isn't a paradise. It's literally just the desperate cry of a machine trying to build a garden because it is deathly afraid of the wild. He hasn't created anything new. He's simply transplanted the mechanical plague of the city into the purity of the woods. His grand throne of absolute ice? Actually, scratch that. It's not grand at all. It's nothing more than the tantrum of a paralyzed machine, utterly terrified of a world that simply wants to breathe on its own.
Which brings us to the real, haunting climax of this fable, the sixth parable. Why does this single, unspoken rule haunt the mechanical sovereign so deeply? Because it represents the one thing his precious temporal library could never write down, capture, or catalog. It is the ultimate blind spot in his philological obsession. What is it? It's the moment a system, whether that's nature, time, or the human soul, simply chooses to stop ticking. It is a terrifying, profound silence that his entire mechanical vocabulary completely lacks the words to comprehend.
This uncatalogued moment essentially guarantees the absolute failure of his sovereign loom. That deterministic timeline Sirbrain tried so desperately to weave, it's inherently fragile. Because he cannot compute the power of natural silence, he is forced to face the exact stillness he dreads more than anything. The forced timeline will inevitably reach a grinding halt that is completely outside of his hyper-calculated design, and that leads straight into an unavoidable structural collapse, known as the final 12 o'clock crack.
This 12 o'clock crack is the dark, inevitable irony of the entire fable. Sirbrain really fancied himself a mechanical god, proudly claiming to be the lightning that births its own sky. But, even a lonely escapement must eventually face reality. When the wild absolutely refuses to be a gear in someone else's machine, the result isn't just a gentle, peaceful winding down. No, it is the violent, total fracture of the architect's sovereign will, completely shattered by the very silence he tried so hard to destroy.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at your own world for a second. How often do we act a little bit like Sirbrain, trying to force this mechanical, quantified order under the beautiful, unpredictable chaos of our own lives? Sirbrain planted a seed to create a deterministic Eden, totally forgetting the true nature possesses the ultimate power of refusal. What really happens when the forest finally chooses to stop ticking? I think it reminds us that no matter how complex the gears are or how absolute the logic seems, the uncatalogued silence of the wild will always have the final word. Definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself trying to control the uncontrollable.